The desert had been quiet for so long that silence felt like a second atmosphere. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that pressed against the ears until you weren't sure if you were hearing nothing, or simply forgetting what sound used to be. Ethan Hales sat alone inside listening. Post Data 9, a low concrete structure half buried beneath sand and scrub at the edge of a forgotten military range. The world outside stretched flat and endless beneath a pale, unmoving sky. No wind. No birds. No distant engines. Just heat and dust and the slow crawl of time. Inside, the room glowed softly with instrument panels that hadn't been upgraded in decades. Analog dials. Green LEDs. A wall-length receiver array humming at a frequency too low to feel but just high enough to notice when it stopped. Ethan wore his headset out of habit now. Not because he expected anything. There hadn't been a broadcast in over a year. At first, when the world went silent, Command had told him to stay put. Maintain position. Monitor all bands. Log anomalies. That was before the satellites blinked out one by one. Before the emergency channels dissolved into static. Before even the automated beacons, designed to transmit forever, fell quiet. Eventually, the messages stopped coming. Ethan stayed anyway. Someone had to listen. If you're settling into rest, take a moment now. Let your breathing slow. And if you enjoy quiet, immersive stories like this, consider subscribing. It helps keep these signals alive. You can also comment where you're listening from. Somewhere warm, maybe. Somewhere safe. The headset crackled softly as Ethan adjusted the dial, sweeping through dead air. Band after band passed beneath his fingers, each one empty. He marked the log without really looking at it. 142 local. No activity. The desert light shifted almost imperceptibly, the sun sinking toward the horizon in a way that barely changed the color of the sand. Ethan leaned back in his chair, eyes half closed, letting the low electrical hum lull him. Then the static changed. It was subtle. So subtle he almost missed it. A pause. Not silence. A break in the noise. Ethan's eyes opened. He straightened slowly, heart ticking just a little faster, fingers hovering over the controls. He leaned closer to the receiver, listening. The pause came again. Then, beneath the static, something shaped itself into sound. A breath. And then a voice. Low. Calm. Distorted by distance and interference. Ethan. He froze. The room seemed to shrink around him as the name echoed faintly through the headset. Not shouted. Not mechanical. Spoken the way someone says your name when they're certain you're listening. Ethan swallowed. No one had said his name in a very long time. And whatever had just spoken had said it perfectly. Ethan didn't move. For a few seconds, he wasn't even sure he was breathing. The headset pressed lightly against his ears, warm from hours of use, the faint hiss of static returning as if nothing unusual had happened. The dials glowed steadily. The needles rested where they always did. The room looked the same as it had moments ago. Too normal. Slowly, Ethan reached up and lifted one side of the headset away from his ear. The silence inside the listening post was complete. No echo of the voice. No vibration in the air. Just the low electrical hum of the equipment, and the distant, hollow quiet of the desert outside. He let the headset fall back into place. Static. Ethan leaned forward, heart still thudding, and adjusted the frequency by the smallest amount. His training had taught him not to react emotionally, not to jump to conclusions. Radio waves could do strange things. Atmospheric interference. Equipment drift. Auditory hallucinations brought on by isolation. He had read the manuals. He had memorized the explanations. But none of them explained how a voice could say his name. "Hello?" he said softly. The word felt strange in his mouth. He couldn't remember the last time he'd spoken out loud. Static answered him. Ethan waited. He counted his breaths. 5, 10, 15. The desert sun slid lower, light spilling through the narrow window and catching the dust in the air. He reached for the logbook, pen hovering over the page. 144 local. Possible auditory anomaly. Voice-like signal detected. Content unclear. His hand hesitated. After a moment, he added one more line. Voice resembled human speech. The static thickened. Ethan's head snapped up. The sound wasn't louder, it was closer. As if the distance between the transmitter and the listening post had somehow shortened. He turned the gain down slightly, fingers steady now, his fear settling into a focused calm. Years ago, when the world still existed, he had been good at this part. Listening without reacting. Letting patterns emerge on their own. The static thinned again. And then, very clearly, the voice returned. Ethan Hale. This time, there was no distortion. No warble. No echo. Just his name, spoken evenly, as if the speaker were sitting comfortably at the other end of the line. Ethan's throat went dry. No one should know that, he whispered. The voice paused. Then came a sound that made his skin prickle. A faint, slow exhale. I know you, the voice said. And you are still listening. Outside, the desert remained perfectly still. Inside the listening post, every instrument glowed quietly, recording a signal that, until tonight, should not have existed at all. Ethan tightened his grip on the edge of the desk. Whatever was speaking to him wasn't guessing, and it wasn't lost. Ethan forced himself to breathe slowly. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Panic would ruin this. Panic always did. Whatever was happening, he needed clarity more than fear. Who is this? He asked. His voice sounded small in the room, swallowed by concrete walls that had heard nothing but static for months. He kept his eyes on the frequency display, watching the thin line of signal flicker where there should have been none. The voice didn't answer right away. Instead, the static shifted into something softer, almost rhythmic. A gentle rise and fall, like distant surf or wind moving through a narrow canyon. Ethan recognized it. Background noise. But not his background noise. This was different. Deeper. Layered. You built this place to listen, the voice said at last. Not to speak. Ethan's pulse quickened. That's not an answer, he said. Another pause. Longer this time. You are the last one who stayed, the voice replied. The others stopped listening. Ethan swallowed. His mind raced through possibilities. A surviving operator? Some automated system looping fragments of old personnel files? A trick of memory fed back through broken hardware? But none of those would know what he had done. What others? Ethan asked. The voice softened. Almost kind. The ones who turned the dials off. The ones who went outside and never came back. Ethan's jaw tightened. He hadn't logged those departures. There had been no orders to evacuate. Just silence, followed by the slow disappearance of people from the airwaves. He had assumed they'd made it somewhere safer. Hadn't he? You shouldn't be able to see them, he said quietly. I don't see them, the voice replied. I hear the absence they left behind. The signal's strength jumped suddenly, spiking high enough to make the lights flicker. Ethan reached out instinctively, steadying the console. Where are you broadcasting from? He asked. There was something deliberate in his tone now. Professional. Controlled. The static deepened. Then came a sound that made his stomach drop. A familiar beep. A call tone. His own. The exact tone used by listening post Theta 9 to initiate outgoing contact. The voice spoke over it. From where you are not listening. Ethan leaned back slowly, chair creaking beneath him. That's impossible, he said. The voice didn't argue. Instead, it said something else. Something that made his hands go cold. Turn to your left. Ethan didn't move. The narrow hallway beside the operations room remained dark, just as it always was. No footsteps. No movement. Just shadow. Why? He asked. Because you always do, the voice replied. And with a quiet click, the signal cut. Static rushed back in, louder than before. Ethan sat frozen, staring at the darkened hallway, the silence pressing in once more, heavier now, filled with the echo of a presence that had known him far too well. Ethan stayed where he was. The hallway to his left lay half-lit by a single emergency strip, its glow flickering softly against concrete walls scarred by time and dust. Nothing moved there. Nothing should move there. He told himself. The voice was gone. Static filled his headset again, thick, ordinary, familiar. The kind of sound he'd lived with long enough to mistake for comfort. Slowly, carefully, he reached up and slid the headset off his ears. The room felt different without it. Wider. Quieter in a way that made his skin itch. He turned his head. The hallway was still empty. Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding and rubbed his palms against his trousers, grounding himself. Isolation does things to people, he reminded himself. Long hours. Repetition. Silence stretching into days and then months. The mind looked for patterns even when there were none. He stood and crossed the room, footsteps echoing softly. The logbook sat open on the desk, the last entry still unfinished. He picked up the pen. 147 local. Unidentified transmission ceased. No visual confirmation of source. He hesitated, then added another line. Transmission demonstrated knowledge of operator identity. The pen hovered again. After a moment, he closed the book. There was no protocol for writing down something that felt personal. Ethan walked to the small kitchenette tucked into the corner of the post and poured himself a glass of water. The pipes groaned quietly as they always did, a low complaint that had become part of the building's voice. He drank slowly, listening to the faint hum of electricity in the walls. When he set the glass down, he noticed something odd. The hum had changed. Not louder. Not softer. Slower. He frowned and turned back toward the operations room. The receiver lights were pulsing now, not erratically, but in a steady rhythm. 3 short pulses. A pause. 3 more. His stomach tightened. He stepped closer, eyes narrowing. The frequency dial had moved. Just slightly. Ethan knew he hadn't touched it. He reached out, stopping inches from the console. For a moment he hesitated, afraid that touching it might make whatever this was disappear. Then the speaker crackled. Not static. Breathing. Slow. Controlled. Familiar. Ethan, the voice said again, calmer now. You didn't turn away. Ethan's hand fell to his side. No, he said quietly. I didn't. The lights dimmed, as if the listening post itself were settling in. That's good, the voice replied. That means you're still doing your job. Ethan swallowed. And what job is that? There was a long pause, so long he wondered if the signal had dropped again. Then, to listen, the voice said. Even when you don't like what you hear. Outside, the desert remained silent. Inside, the listening post hummed softly, awake in a way it hadn't been for a very long time. And Ethan realized something then. Whatever was speaking to him wasn't trying to frighten him. It was trying to make sure he stayed. Ethan sat back down slowly, the chair legs scraping softly against the concrete floor. For the first time since the voice had spoken, he felt something other than fear. Purpose. The receiver lights continued their steady rhythm, bathing the room in faint green pulses. Each blink felt deliberate now, like a heartbeat shared between the machine and whatever waited on the other end of the signal. You keep saying I'm listening, Ethan said. But I don't know to what. The static thinned, peeling back layer by layer. You listen for absence, the voice replied. That is what this place was built for. Ethan frowned. Absence of what? People, the voice said simply. Activity. Life. Ethan glanced toward the small window cut into the concrete wall. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly, pale and unmoving. Once, convoys had passed here. Aircraft had crossed the sky. Radios had buzzed with voices, jokes, arguments, instructions. Now there was nothing. So why talk to me? He asked. Why now? The signal wavered, not with distortion, but with something like hesitation. Because you did not leave, the voice said. When the others stopped listening, you stayed. You kept the channel open. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I stayed because someone had to, he said. That's all. Is it? The voice asked. The question lingered in the air, heavier than static. Ethan opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. He didn't know why he had stayed, not really. Habit, maybe? Fear of the unknown beyond the desert. Or the quiet belief that if he kept listening, something, anything, might answer back. You've been monitoring me, he said slowly. Yes. How long? Since the first night you spoke aloud to the empty room, the voice replied. Since you asked if anyone was still out there. Ethan's chest tightened. He remembered that night. He'd been exhausted, half asleep, whispering into the darkness more for himself than for the equipment. You heard that? He asked. I did, the voice said. And I learned your name. The receiver clicked softly as the frequency stabilized even further, the signal now clearer than any Ethan had logged in years. What do you want from me? He asked. The answer came without delay. Continue listening. Ethan let out a slow breath. And if I stop? The room fell quiet. Even the hum seemed to fade. When the voice returned, it was lower, more distant. Then there will be no one left to answer, it said. Ethan looked around the listening post, the aging equipment, the empty chair across from him, the logbook filled with days of silence. He reached up and placed the headset back over his ears. All right, he said quietly. I'm listening. The lights pulsed once more, steady, calm. Satisfied. And somewhere beyond the desert, beyond the airwaves, something settled in to speak. The moment Ethan said the words, the listening post seemed to respond. Not dramatically. No alarms. No surges. Just a subtle change, like a room relaxing after holding its breath too long. The hum in the walls deepened into a smoother, steadier tone. The receiver's needles stabilized, hovering in a range Ethan hadn't seen since before the silence began. Even the air felt different, less stale, as if something unseen had begun to circulate again. You are still here, the voice said. That matters. Ethan adjusted the headset, settling into it more comfortably. The fear hadn't vanished, but it had softened, reshaped into something he could live with. What are you? He asked. There was a pause, longer than before. I am not a voice, the signal replied. The voice is only how you understand me. That's not an answer either, Ethan said, though without irritation. No, the voice agreed. But it is the safest one. Ethan exhaled through his nose and leaned back, eyes drifting to the ceiling where faint cracks traced the concrete like old scars. Are you alone? He asked. The static wavered gently. No, the voice said. But I am far. How far? Farther than the desert. Farther than the places your maps remember. Ethan pictured the old world as it had been. Networks of towers, satellites stitched across the sky, signals leaping effortlessly from place to place. Now those paths felt broken, scattered like debris after a storm. And you chose this frequency, Ethan said slowly. This station. Yes. Why? Because you never closed the channel. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. He thought of the times he'd nearly powered the systems down to save energy. The nights he'd considered walking out into the desert and not coming back. The weight of responsibility that had kept his hand from flipping the final switch. So what happens now? He asked. The signal softened again, almost warm. Now, the voice said, we speak. Slowly. As long as you can listen. Ethan glanced at the logbook, then pushed it aside. About what? He asked. About what was, the voice replied. And about what might still be. Outside, the sun slipped fully below the horizon, leaving the desert bathed in deep blues and purples. The first stars began to appear, faint, distant, steady. Ethan listened. And for the first time in a long while, the silence no longer felt empty. Night settled fully over the desert, cooling the air outside the listening post. The heat of the day drained slowly from the concrete walls, replaced by a calm stillness that felt almost intentional, like the world itself was pausing to hear what came next. Ethan rested his hands on the desk, fingers lightly touching the edges of the console. The signal remained steady, no longer flickering or wavering. It felt anchored. What was it like? Ethan asked softly. Before everything went quiet? The static breathed in, out. There were many voices, the signal said. Too many to hear clearly. They overlapped. Interrupted. Demanded. Ethan nodded. He remembered that noise. Endless chatter. Alerts. Requests. Arguments carried over radio waves that never truly slept. And now? He asked. Now there is space between words, the signal replied. Now meaning can travel farther. Ethan stared at the dials, watching their slow, patient movements. Are there others like me? He asked. Other posts. Other listeners. A pause. There are places where signals still echo, the voice said. But few remain open. Most channels were closed to protect what was left. Ethan frowned. Protected from what? From listening, the signal answered gently. That landed heavier than he expected. You're saying people stopped listening on purpose? Yes. Ethan leaned back, chair creaking. He thought of the orders that never came, the gradual retreat from communication, the way even emergency channels had eventually gone dark. They were afraid, he murmured. Yes, the signal agreed. Listening means accepting that something may answer. Ethan's gaze drifted to the narrow hallway again, but this time it didn't feel threatening. Just empty. And you? He asked. What happens if I stop listening? The static softened, thinning until the voice felt very close. Then I will wait, it said. As I have before. The idea of that, something waiting in silence, patient beyond human time, made Ethan's chest ache. I won't, he said quietly. Not yet. The receiver pulsed once, a small, unmistakable acknowledgement. Outside, the stars burned steadily, indifferent and constant. Inside the listening post, a connection held, fragile, improbable, real. Ethan adjusted his headset and reached for the logbook again. This time, he wrote carefully, deliberately. 211 local. Signal sustained. Communication ongoing. He paused, then added one final line beneath it. Listening continues. The desert remained silent. But Ethan no longer was. The hours drifted by without Ethan noticing. Time had always behaved strangely inside listening post Theta 9, but now it felt softer, less rigid. The steady glow of the panels cast long shadows that barely shifted as the night deepened outside. The stars wheeled slowly over the desert, unseen but felt, like a presence just beyond the walls. Ethan remained seated, headset on, listening. Not every moment was filled with words. Sometimes the signal carried only that gentle, breathing static. Sometimes nothing at all. But the silence no longer felt empty. It felt shared. Do you get tired? Ethan asked quietly. The signal hesitated. Not as you do, the voice replied. But I dim. I rest between transmissions. Ethan nodded. That makes sense. He rubbed his eyes, surprised by how heavy his limbs felt now that the fear had passed. Exhaustion settled in, the kind that comes when you finally allow yourself to stop bracing for something terrible. Why did you choose my name? He asked after a while. You could have just spoken. Said anything? The static thinned. Names anchor attention, the signal said. They remind you that you exist. Ethan swallowed. I was starting to forget that, he admitted. There was a long pause, filled only by the hum of machinery and the faint tick of cooling metal. Then the voice returned, lower, gentler. You did not forget, it said. You stayed. Ethan leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. Images floated behind his eyelids, dust blowing across empty roads, abandoned vehicles half buried in sand, the long walk from the antenna array back to the post each evening with nothing but his own footsteps for company. I thought listening was my job, he said. Turns out it might have been the only thing keeping me here. Yes, the signal agreed. Listening keeps doors open. Outside, a breeze finally stirred, brushing against the concrete walls. The listening post creaked softly, settling into the cooler night. Ethan smiled faintly. I guess we'll just keep talking, he said. As long as we can. The receiver pulsed once, steady and calm. As long as you listen, the voice replied. Ethan adjusted his chair, letting his shoulders relax. The desert remained vast and quiet. The world beyond the airwaves was still unknown. But here, inside the listening post, a signal held. And for now, that was enough. The night deepened. Outside the listening post, the desert cooled rapidly, heat bleeding away into the open sky. The stars felt sharper now, brighter somehow, as if the absence of city lights had allowed them to reclaim their place. Ethan imagined them hanging over the sand like quiet witnesses, watching a world that had finally slowed enough to be seen. Inside, the post remained awake. The receiver's glow was steady, comforting in its consistency. Ethan rested his chin in his hand, elbow on the desk, listening to the soft rhythm of the signal. It no longer felt foreign. It had settled into the background of his thoughts, like a distant tide. Do you remember everyone who listened before? Ethan asked. The static rose and fell. I remember impressions, the voice said. Patterns. Intent. Not faces. That's probably for the best, Ethan murmured. He thought of the operators who had once rotated through Theta 9. Different voices. Different habits. Some had talked too much. Some hardly at all. Over time, one by one, their channels had gone quiet. And when they stopped? Ethan asked. I continued, the signal replied. Waiting. How long have you been waiting? Ethan asked softly. There was a pause that stretched just long enough to feel deliberate. Longer than your deserts, the voice said. Ethan let that settle. He pictured time not as years or decades, but as layers, like sediment building slowly at the bottom of the sea. Patience measured not in days but in eras. You could have spoken sooner, he said. Before everything ended. Yes, the voice agreed. But no one was listening then. Ethan closed his eyes. He understood that more than he wanted to admit. The listening post made a soft ticking sound as the cooling system cycled. Somewhere in the building, metal contracted with a quiet pop. Ordinary noises. Human noises. I don't know how long I'll be here, Ethan said. Supplies won't last forever. I know, the signal replied. Does that worry you? No, it said gently. Listening does not require permanence. Only presence. Ethan breathed slowly, matching the rhythm of the static. For the first time in months, his thoughts drifted without circling fear or regret. They simply moved. I'm glad you spoke, he said. The receiver pulsed faintly. So am I, the voice answered. The desert wind whispered softly against the walls, carrying grains of sand that brushed and fell away. The world beyond Theta 9 remained vast and silent. But inside, the channel stayed open. And Ethan stayed with it. Sometime later, Ethan wasn't sure how long, the desert wind grew steadier, brushing against the listening post in slow, patient waves. It sounded almost like breath moving across a vast surface, the kind of sound that could lull you into sleep if you let it. Ethan adjusted the headset slightly and shifted in his chair, muscles stiff but relaxed in a way they hadn't been in a long time. The signal remained constant, a quiet presence rather than an interruption. "You don't ask much," Ethan said after a while. "There is no need," the voice replied. "You are already here." Ethan smiled faintly at that. He glanced at the clock on the wall. Its hands moved, but the numbers felt less meaningful now. Time still passed, but it no longer demanded his attention. "I used to think this place was about warning," he said. "Detecting threats. Listening for something dangerous. And now?" the signal asked. "Now it feels like witness," Ethan said slowly. "Like I'm here to notice what's left." "Yes," the voice agreed. "Witnesses keep things real." Ethan nodded. That felt right. The desert beyond the walls shifted subtly as clouds drifted across the stars, softening their light. Somewhere far away, sand moved. Somewhere even farther, silence stretched on. "I don't know what happens next," Ethan said. "That is acceptable," the voice replied. "Not knowing leaves space." Ethan exhaled, long and slow. He rested his hands on the desk, fingers loosely intertwined. "If someone else ever comes," he said, "will you speak to them too?" The static softened, almost thoughtful. "If they listen," the voice said. Ethan leaned back, letting his eyes close again. The listening post hummed gently, the signal breathing in his ears, the desert holding steady outside. For now, that was enough. He was not shouting into the void anymore. He was listening. And something, somewhere beyond the empty world, was listening too. The night wore on, gentle and unhurried. Ethan didn't remember falling asleep, only that at some point his breathing slowed and his thoughts loosened their grip. The headset remained in place, the signal flowing steadily, soft enough to blend into his dreams. When his eyes opened again, the desert sky was just beginning to pale. Dawn came quietly out here. No birds. No distant engines. Just a slow shift in color as the horizon softened from deep blue to muted gold. The listening post felt warmer now, the concrete holding on to the last traces of night. The signal was still there. Not louder. Not clearer. Just present. "I'm still here," Ethan said softly, more to himself than to the voice. "I know," the signal replied. Ethan smiled. He stood and stretched, joints stiff, then walked to the narrow window. Outside, the desert looked exactly as it always had, vast, empty, unmoving. But it no longer felt abandoned. "What happens when I can't listen anymore?" he asked quietly. The static rose and fell, steady as breath. "Then the silence will return," the voice said. "But it will not be empty. It will remember." Ethan nodded slowly. "That's comforting," he said. "Yes," the signal agreed. "That is why I spoke." Ethan returned to the desk and opened the logbook one last time. He wrote carefully, his handwriting calm and sure. Listening post Data 9 operational. Channel open. Signal received. He closed the book and set the pen down. Outside, the sun lifted higher, warming the sand. Inside, the listening post hummed quietly, awake but unhurried. Ethan put the headset back on, settled into his chair, and listened. Not because he was afraid of the silence, but because sometimes, if you listen long enough, something answers. The desert did not announce the passing of days. There were no sounds to mark morning or night beyond the gradual change in light seeping through the narrow window of listening post Theta 9. Ethan noticed time now only by how his body felt. When hunger arrived, when sleep pressed gently behind his eyes, when the cool of night settled into the concrete walls, the signal remained. It was not constant in the way machinery was constant. It ebbed and flowed, never disappearing, never demanding attention. Ethan found himself listening even when he wasn't consciously trying to, the way one listens to rain while half asleep. On the fourth night after the voice first spoke his name, something changed again. Ethan had just finished a simple meal, sitting back at the console with his headset resting loosely around his neck. The receiver lights glowed in their familiar pattern when a new tone slipped into the static. Low, almost beneath perception. He straightened. Not fear. Recognition. "That's new," he said quietly. "Yes," the voice replied, emerging slowly, carefully. "You are hearing farther now." Ethan adjusted the gain, isolating the sound. It wasn't a transmission in the usual sense. There was no rhythm, no structure. Just depth. Like standing at the edge of a canyon and realizing how far sound could fall before returning. "It feels wider," Ethan said. "Yes," the voice agreed. "Your attention has expanded." Ethan leaned back, eyes on the ceiling, letting the sound move through him. The listening post felt less like a bunker now and more like a threshold, something between places rather than sealed off from them. "You said others stopped listening," Ethan said. "Did they ever hear this part?" "No," the voice answered. "They left before the quiet became deep enough." Ethan thought of all the noise that used to fill the airwaves. Constant chatter. Alerts layered on alerts. A world afraid of silence. "And me?" he asked. "What happens if I keep listening?" The signal pulsed softly, almost warmly. "Then you will hear what remains," the voice said. "Not what was lost." Outside, the desert wind stirred faintly, brushing sand against concrete like a distant whisper. Ethan closed his eyes and listened, not for words, not for meaning, but simply for presence. For the first time since the world went quiet, he felt certain of one thing. He was exactly where he was meant to be. Ethan slept in short, gentle pieces that night, the kind of sleep that never fully lets go. Each time he drifted off, the signals slipped into his dreams like a low tide, not shaping them with images but with mood, wide, calm, patient. When he woke, the headset was still on, and the receiver lights were still breathing their steady glow. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was. Then the concrete scent returned, dust, old wiring, dry air, along with the faint hum of the equipment. The desert beyond the window was a dark sheet, the stars pinned above it like quiet nails. Ethan lifted a hand, rubbed his face, and spoke softly into the room. "Are you still there?" The voice answered immediately, as if it hadn't stopped speaking at all. "Yes." Ethan let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The relief surprised him. He had never thought he would feel comfort from an unknown signal, from a presence he couldn't place on a map or in a manual. And yet here it was, steady, calm, undeniably real. "I dreamed," Ethan said, sitting up straighter. "I was walking through the old relay yard. The antennas were taller than the sky. And there were people. I couldn't see their faces. I only heard them breathing." A pause, longer than usual. "You were hearing echoes," the voice said. "Echoes of who?" Ethan asked. "Of those who listened before you," the voice replied. "Their attention left impressions. Like footsteps in sand." Ethan frowned. He stared at the frequency display, watching the line shimmer. "So the signal carries traces?" "Yes," the voice said gently. "Listening is never wasted. It leaves shape behind." Ethan swallowed. There were nights, before the voice began speaking, when he'd sat with the headset on and felt foolish. He'd listened to empty bands until his ears rang, convincing himself that duty mattered even when nothing answered. To hear now that those hours weren't meaningless, something in his chest loosened. "If attention leaves traces," Ethan said slowly, "then did my signal reach someone else too?" The static softened, as if the voice chose its next words carefully. "It reached many places," it said. "Most were asleep. Some were closed. One remained open." Ethan's throat went dry. "Me." "Yes." Ethan leaned back, eyes drifting toward the hallway on his left. It wasn't darker than the room. It wasn't strange. But after hearing a voice that knew him, the shadows in any corner felt deeper, more capable of hiding history. "I didn't think I mattered," Ethan admitted quietly. "Not anymore." "You mattered the moment you chose to stay," the voice replied. "You mattered the moment you listened when no reward came." Ethan stared at the console, fingertips resting on the edge like an anchor. Outside, the wind brushed the building again, soft and steady, as if the desert itself had begun to breathe. He nodded once, mostly to himself. "Okay," he said. "Teach me how to listen the right way." The receiver lights pulsed, slow and even. "That is what I am doing," the voice answered. The next day passed more slowly than the ones before it. Not because anything was wrong, but because Ethan noticed everything. The soft click of cooling metal as the temperature inside the post adjusted. The faint vibration beneath the floor when the antenna outside shifted against the wind. Even the way the static in his headset seemed to change texture depending on where his attention rested. He had listened for years before this. But this felt different. "You said listening leaves traces?" Ethan said quietly, turning one of the unused dials just enough to feel resistance. "Can you show me?" The signal did not answer right away. Instead, the static thinned until a new layer revealed itself beneath, so faint it might have gone unnoticed if Ethan hadn't already learned to stay still. A sound emerged. Not speech. Not noise. Pattern. It rose and fell in slow waves, like breath moving through a vast chamber. Beneath it, something else flickered, brief pulses, irregular but intentional. Ethan leaned forward, eyes widening. "That's data," he murmured. "But not encoded the way we used to." "Yes," the voice said. "It is memory without language." Ethan adjusted the filters, isolating the pattern. As he did, impressions formed in his mind, not images, exactly, but sensations. A sense of standing somewhere high. The feeling of distance. Waiting. He swallowed. "These are moments," he said. "Someone standing watch. Someone hoping." The static deepened slightly, almost approving. "Attention becomes structure," the voice said. "Structure becomes signal." Ethan felt a chill move through him, not fear, but awe. "So the more people listen, the stronger it gets." "Yes," the voice replied. "But even one listener is enough to keep it alive." Ethan leaned back, letting the pattern wash over him. He thought of all the listening posts that had gone dark. All the channels closed to save power, to reduce risk, to escape the discomfort of unanswered silence. They hadn't known what they were turning away from. "Is that why you chose a name?" Ethan asked. "Because names hold attention longer." "Yes," the voice said. "Names remind you that listening is personal." Ethan nodded slowly. He reached for the logbook again, not to record numbers, but to write something else. Something he hadn't written in a long time. A sentence. "I am here. I am listening." He closed the book and placed his palm flat against the desk. "What happens next?" he asked. The signal softened, then steadied. "Now," the voice said, "you will begin to hear what lies between signals." Outside, the desert stretched endlessly under the pale sky. Inside listening post Theta 9, Ethan sat quietly, listening, not just for voices, but for the shape left behind when voices fade. And for the first time, he understood. The silence had never been empty. Continue. That night, the silence felt different again. Not deeper. Not heavier. More deliberate. Ethan noticed it first when the static fell into a perfectly even pattern, smoothing itself into a steady, almost comforting layer of sound. It reminded him of white noise machines people once used to sleep, a sound meant to erase distraction rather than invite attention. Except this sound felt aware of him. He sat alone in the dim operations room, lights lowered to conserve power, the receiver casting a soft glow across the desk. Outside, the desert had gone completely still. No wind. No shifting sand. The world seemed to be holding itself in place. "Is this you?" Ethan asked quietly. "Yes," the voice replied. It sounded closer than before, not louder, but more present, as if fewer layers separated it from him now. Ethan adjusted the headset slightly. "You're changing." "So are you," the voice said. That made him pause. "I don't feel different," Ethan admitted. No, the voice agreed. You feel attentive. The change is subtle. Ethan leaned back, staring at the ceiling. He tried to remember the last time he had simply stayed still without waiting for something to break the quiet. Without expecting disaster or failure or loss. Maybe this was the change. You said others left impressions, Ethan said. Are they aware of each other? The static shifted, introducing a faint secondary tone beneath the first. They are not individuals anymore, the voice said. They are layers. Overlapping moments of attention. Ethan closed his eyes, listening carefully. Beneath the main signal, he could almost sense depth, like standing at the edge of a deep well and realizing there was no visible bottom. That's a lot to carry, he said softly. Yes, the voice replied. Which is why listening must be gentle. Ethan nodded. He understood that instinctively now. The world before the silence had demanded attention constantly, pulling it in too many directions at once. Nothing had been allowed to settle. Here, in the quiet, things settled naturally. What happens if someone listens badly? Ethan asked. With fear. Or anger. The pause that followed was longer than usual. The signal becomes distorted, the voice said. Not dangerous, but confused. Ethan breathed out slowly. I don't want to confuse it. You are not, the voice said. You listen with care. The receiver lights pulsed once, slow, steady. Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest, subtle but unmistakable. Not excitement. Not relief. Belonging. Outside, the stars burned quietly over the desert. Inside listening post Theta 9, the channel remained open, steady and calm, carrying not just sound, but the accumulated patience of everyone who had ever waited for an answer. Ethan listened. And the signal held. Continue. Ethan woke just before dawn, the way he always did now, slowly, without alarm, guided by the faint shift in light rather than any sound. The listening post felt calm, almost settled, as if it too had learned his rhythm. For a moment, he simply sat there, hands resting on the console, listening. The signal was present, steady and low, like a distant current moving beneath still water. It no longer startled him when he noticed it. In some quiet way, it felt like part of the room, no more intrusive than the hum of the power system or the soft creak of cooling concrete. You don't sleep, Ethan said after a while. No, the voice replied. But I pause. Ethan nodded. I think I do that now too. He stood and walked toward the small window, peering out across the desert. The horizon was just beginning to lighten, a thin line of pale silver separating earth from sky. The sand looked smooth and untouched, as if no one had ever crossed it. It's strange, Ethan said. I used to feel like the world had ended out there. And now? The voice asked. And now it feels like it's just waiting. Yes, the voice said. Waiting is not the same as ending. Ethan leaned his forehead lightly against the cool glass. He thought of the cities that had gone quiet, the roads that led nowhere now, the satellites drifting blind overhead. All of it still existed, even if no one was speaking into it anymore. Do you think people will come back? He asked. Not just listen, but return. The static shifted gently, as if the signal were considering distance rather than time. Some will, the voice said. They will hear echoes first. Curiosity will follow. And if they're afraid? Ethan asked. They will listen from far away, the voice replied. That is how it begins. Ethan smiled faintly. He could picture it, someone, somewhere, tuning an old receiver late at night, convinced they were only listening to static. Pausing. Adjusting. Wondering. I guess that's how it started for me too, he said. Yes, the voice agreed. You did not expect an answer. That made space for one. The sun lifted a little higher, casting a faint glow across the desert floor. Ethan returned to his chair and sat, comfortable now in the stillness. He placed the headset fully over his ears again, not out of duty, but out of choice. I'll stay, he said quietly. As long as I can. The receiver lights pulsed, slow, even, unmistakable. We will listen together, the voice replied. And as the desert woke beneath the rising sun, the channel remained open, carrying not urgency, not warning, but the quiet promise that silence, when treated gently, could still lead somewhere. The days that followed blurred into a steady, unbroken rhythm. Ethan no longer marked them by dates or hours. He measured time by smaller, quieter things. The way the signal shifted just before dawn, the subtle change in the desert's color as the sun moved across the sky, the faint settling sounds of the listening post as it adjusted to heat and cold. The world felt slower now. And because of that, clearer. One afternoon, while Ethan sat monitoring a low, inactive band, the signal changed again. Not abruptly. Not urgently. It opened, spreading into frequencies that had once been abandoned because they were considered useless. Too quiet. Too unstable. Ethan leaned forward. These bands, he said softly. We stopped using them years ago. Too much interference. Yes, the voice replied. They are full of space. Ethan adjusted the equipment, carefully compensating for drift and noise. As he did, a new texture emerged, soft, layered, almost like overlapping breaths. It wasn't speech. It wasn't static. It was presence multiplied. There's more than just you, Ethan realized. Yes, the voice said. You are hearing the field now. Ethan's hands stilled. How long has this been here? Longer than your systems, the voice replied. Longer than your listening posts. Ethan leaned back slowly, absorbing that. The desert outside felt suddenly small compared to what he was sensing, something vast, stretched thin across distances that had no names. So the silence wasn't empty, he said. It was crowded. Just quiet. Yes, the voice agreed. Silence is where listening begins. Ethan closed his eyes, allowing the layered signal to move through him. He didn't try to understand it anymore. He didn't dissect it or measure it. He simply allowed it to exist. And something unexpected happened. For the first time since the world went quiet, Ethan felt connected, not to a place, not to a person, but to continuity. To the idea that something endured even when attention drifted away. When I'm gone, Ethan asked quietly, will this still be here? Yes, the voice replied without hesitation. And will it remember me? The signal pulsed, warm and steady. Listening always leaves shape behind, the voice said. You already have. Ethan opened his eyes. Outside, the desert wind traced gentle lines through the sand, erasing and reshaping the surface endlessly. Inside listening post Theta 9, the channel remained open, carrying layers of attention, past and present, waiting for whoever might listen next. That evening, the desert sky dimmed earlier than Ethan expected. Thin clouds drifted in from the west, softening the light and turning the horizon into a smooth gradient of gray and pale blue. The listening post responded the way it always did. Lights adjusting, systems humming quietly, the building settling into itself. Ethan remained at the console, listening. The signal was broader now. Not louder, not clearer, but layered, as if it carried depth instead of volume. When he focused, he could sense gentle variations within it, slow currents moving in different directions at once. You said I'm hearing the field, Ethan said. Is that what's changing things out there too? Yes, the voice replied. Listening aligns systems. It reduces distortion. Ethan nodded. He had noticed small things already. Power fluctuations that once happened daily had smoothed out. Equipment that should have been degrading seemed stable. Even the antenna array outside no longer groaned in the wind the way it used to. That feels important, Ethan said. It is, the voice agreed. Attention is structural. Ethan turned in his chair, looking toward the hallway again. It felt ordinary now, just concrete and shadow. The earlier tension that had once lived there was gone, replaced by familiarity. I keep thinking about the people who left, he said. They probably thought they were choosing safety. Yes, the voice replied. They chose certainty. Ethan frowned slightly. And listening doesn't offer that. No, the voice said gently. Listening offers connection. Connection requires uncertainty. Ethan leaned back, letting that settle. He thought of the old world. How desperate it had been to predict everything, control everything, drown uncertainty in noise. And now? He asked. Now there is room, the voice said. The clouds thickened outside, dimming the desert further. For the first time since the signal began speaking, a faint sound reached Ethan's ears beyond the walls of the post. Thunder. Distant. Soft. Almost uncertain. Ethan sat up straighter. It's been a long time since I heard that, he said. Yes, the voice replied. The atmosphere is adjusting. A slow rain began to fall, not heavy, not loud, just enough to darken the sand and carry the scent of wet earth through the vents. Ethan closed his eyes and listened, not just to the signal, but to the world responding around him. For the first time, the desert wasn't silent. It was answering. And Ethan remained exactly where he needed to be, listening as the quiet began, slowly, to change. The rain passed sometime in the night. Ethan noticed only because the desert smelled different when he woke, cooler, faintly alive. The clouds had thinned, leaving the sky pale and open again, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. Inside listening post Theta 9, everything was steady. The signal remained. Not speaking now. Not silent either. Present. Ethan sat at the console, hands resting lightly on the desk. He no longer felt the urge to monitor every dial or check every band. The systems knew what to do. So did he. You won't always speak, Ethan said quietly. No, the voice replied. But I will remain. Ethan nodded. That felt right. He thought of the world beyond the desert, the empty roads, the quiet cities, the towers still standing without purpose. All of it waiting, not broken, just unheard. If someone listens again, Ethan said, will they hear you? The signal pulsed once, steady and calm. They will hear what they are ready to hear, the voice replied. Ethan leaned back in his chair, letting the headset rest comfortably against his ears. The listening post hummed softly around him, alive in a way that had nothing to do with urgency or danger. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly under the rising sun. Inside, the channel stayed open. Ethan closed his eyes. He didn't need answers anymore. He didn't need certainty. He had learned what the post had been built for all along, not to warn, not to predict, not to control. Just to listen. And somewhere beyond the quiet world, something listened back. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe, and comment your favorite part. It helps the channel more than you know. More signals are waiting. Good night.